Excuse me. Okay, in this video we're going to talk about some rules and do some examples with exponents. Okay, the first rule is multiplying the same base by different power. So x is my base, x to the second times x to the third, and the rule is that we add the exponents, so it's x to the 2 plus 3, which is 5. Now, when we raise exponents to the power, we're going to multiply. Now, that doesn't make sense, but that's what we do. Okay? Then we end up with x to the 2 times 3, which is x to the 6. So we're multiplying exponents when we raise to a power. We're adding them when we multiply. Now, when we divide, x to the 5th, x to the 2nd, we subtract and do 5 minus 2, and we're always going to put the answer where the big exponent is. So 5 minus 2 is 3, so I put it in the numerator. Now, let's say it looked this way. We'd still do x to the 5 minus 3, or excuse me, 5 minus 2. So we're going to get x to the third power, but we have to decide where does it go. It always goes where the large exponent is. And so that would be 1 over x to the 5th. Now, some people would have you to take the numerator minus the denominator, and you'd have negative exponents. But if you work it the way I do, you don't ever have to deal with negative exponents. Just remember, you subtract the powers, just like always, big number minus small, and then put the answer where the large exponent is. And that won't be a 5, that's a 3. I'm sorry. Alright, next rule is that if we have a variable or any base raised to a negative power, that means it's misplaced. So, in other words, misplacing meaning denominator and numerator. So, I'm going to write this as a fraction. I can always put any number over 1. Then if this is misplaced, that means that it needs to go down in the denominator. In other words, the x squared is misplaced. It's up in the top, it needs to go in the bottom. So I'm going to move it to the denominator, and once I move it, it's in the right location, so then I have a positive exponent. Now, and my last rule is that if I have a fraction raised to a power, I take both the numerator and the denominator to the power. So I use my power rule, which means I'm going to multiply exponents. So it's x to the 3 times 4 is x to the 12th over y to the 2 times 4, which is 8. And the bases are different, so there's not anything we can do then. Now, let's look at a couple of examples. Alright, so let's look at taking the half root. Let's look at raising 4 to the 1/2 power, which is the same thing as saying the square root, because the denominator of the fraction indicates the root, and a square root would be like having a little 2 there. Okay? So the two things that multiply and get 4 would be, and I'm always talking the primary root, which is positive, but sometimes you will actually see this plus or minus 2. Now, that doesn't mean you take positive 2 and negative 2. It means they're either both positive or they're both negative. Okay? Now, in the second one, I can remember that I can write 3 halves as 1/2 times 3. Okay? So, this is the same thing as saying, well, 4 raised to the 1/2 power, and then take that all and raise it to the 3rd power. And I did that because I don't have to work with big numbers, because 4 to the 1/2 power is the square root of 4, which is 2, and then I raise it to the 3rd power, and I get 8. Now, let's look at 16 to the 1/4 power. So this is the 4th root of 16. So that 4 things exactly alike that multiply and get 16 would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So that the 4th root then of 16 is plus or minus 2, because it could be negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Now, Another example of breaking down the power, 16 to the 5/4 is the same thing as 16 to the 1/4 power, which is 2 times 5, or time to the 5th power, because 5 times 1/4 is 5/4. So then I'm raising 2 to the 5th power, so I get 32. Okay? Let's look at a couple more examples here. Okay, let's look at -8 to the 1/3 power. So this says I'm going to take -8 and take the cube root of it this time. So now we're looking for three things. So the cube root of -8 then would be -2, because -2 times -2 times -2 is going to give me a -8. Now, this is one of the ones that's kind of difficult, but we're going to take it apart piece by piece. So let's take this and say that it is -1/3 to the 4th power. So then what that means is I'm going to take and I'm going to put this power is my root, and then this is what I'm raising to the power. And the negative exponent means it's misplaced, so I put it in the denominator. Now, the cube root of 125, 5 times 5 is 25, times 5 is 125. So the cube root, in other words, all of this in the parentheses then is 1/5, because the cube root of 1 is just 1. Then I have to raise it to the 4th power, so I have 1 to the 4th power over 5 to the 4th power, which is the same thing as 1 over 625. And then when I divide that, I get 16 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So just remember rules for exponents and apply them.